There's a common trope in horror movies revolving around babysitters. An unsuspecting teenage girl might send her ward to bed before settling in to watch some TV. Unbeknownst to her, someone is watching her every move, preparing to harm her despite her innocence. We've seen this scene play out over and over in classic and cheesy movies alike, but it's an entirely new, wholly horrifying concept in real life. Carla Kaylene Owens was one such babysitter who vanished on the job on August 5th, 1981. Carla was a 14-year-old girl who lived in Calilock, Washington. She lived with John Owens, her father, Gail Owens, her mother, Clara Von Owens, her older sister, Andy Owens, her older brother, and another brother and sister. She was described as being a quiet girl who kept to herself. On the evening of August 5th, 1981, Carla was planning to travel 10 miles away to babysit an infant. The infant's mother wanted to attend some parties that were taking place that weekend, and the babysitting job was expected to extend over Labor Day weekend. Carla and the infant's mother got into the truck of Kenneth Berry at Carla's house. Kenneth Berry was a transient logger in his late 20s, and he was the one who drove Carla and the infant's mother to the infant's mother's house. Carla was dropped off at the trailer home with no problem and began her babysitting job, while the infant's mother went to a party. It would be hours before the woman returned home. When she walked in the front door in the early hours of the morning, she would be faced with a scene out of every parent's nightmare. Her infant lay alone on the couch, with evidence of nobody having cared for them in quite some time. And on the floor around the couch was blood. A lot of blood. Along with this blood were broken fragments of a Galliano bottle. Shards of it littered the blood-stained floor, and those shards, in turn, were painted red. It was extremely evident that Carla hadn't left of her own accord. Someone had attacked her, and, from the looks of things, injured her, although experts later determined that there wasn't enough blood to point to a fatal or even serious wound. Even so, somebody had obviously entered the home, attacked Carla with the bottle, and took her while leaving the infant. The police were called, and Carla's family was notified of her disappearance. Samples of the blood were collected, although, at the time, advanced modern DNA testing simply didn't exist. All they could do was test for what blood type the blood was. Unsurprisingly, it was Carla's blood type. What happens next seems like it would make this case an open and shut. Whatever happened to Carla was tragic, but there would be some justice as long as her kidnapper was discovered and prosecuted, and Carla herself, if she was still alive, was brought home safely to her family. I would warn you, however, to brace yourselves to be angry. I, myself, am infuriated at this next piece of information. The truck of the logger, Kenneth Berry, was searched. On the floor of that truck, they found the other half of the bottle, similarly shattered and covered in blood. The blood, when tested, also matched Carla's blood type, suggesting that the same person had been attacked with the bottle both in the trailer home and in the truck. I'm not an expert in law. I'm not even an expert in the topics I discuss here. Even so, this broken bottle seems like more than enough evidence for police to arrest Kenneth, or at least question him. Kenneth was made a suspect, yes, but he was never formally arrested or charged. I understand that without a confession or Carla herself, it would be difficult to actually prosecute him. But so many pieces of the puzzle are littered around Kenneth, just like that bottle in the floor of his truck, that I find it horrifying he was never further investigated. I should leave a little disclaimer here, though, that with the lack of information online about this case, there could be work going on behind the scenes that I am unaware of. I hope that this is the case. But if there was work being done on Carla's case, it ultimately came to nothing. Kenneth died unexpectedly while working a logging job years later. Some sources say his cause of death has never been determined, while others simply state it as being a heart attack. Either way, Kenneth was pronounced dead before reaching the hospital. As far as I can tell, police never searched his property. I'll explain why this is a horrifying thought in just a few moments. Now, I want to share my theories. A quick disclaimer before we begin. These theories are all based on the evidence I have collected through online research, and I know full well that without speaking to the police, talking with the family members, or being professionally involved in the case, I don't and can't have the full story. The following theories are, again, based on the information I have collected and further implied information in the sources I found. All my theories center around the idea that Kenneth kidnapped Carla. The bottle shards in the bottom of his truck, the fact that he was one of a very small group of people who knew where Carla was that night. Too much points to his guilt, although now that he's dead, very little can be done about it. My theories also unfortunately center around a specific motive, that being that Kenneth wanted to kidnap Carla for sexual gratification. This is the cause of the overwhelming majority of kidnapping cases that don't involve estranged parents attempting to get custody of their children. And further supporting this is the fact that Kenneth left the infant in the home. He didn't harm the baby, as far as I can tell, but he also didn't take it with him, meaning that he was fixated on Carla for a specific reason. My first theory is that Kenneth and the infant's mother were romantically involved. I find it strange that the mother would depend on a random transient logger to transport her and her babysitter back and forth from her mobile home. This also points to the mother not having a car, so Kenneth would have had to drive her to whatever party she wanted to attend after dropping Carla off. Also, being the mother of an infant, while I couldn't find any details about her, she was likely around Kenneth's age. If this was all the case, it would mean that Carla was aware of Kenneth's relationship with the family she was babysitting for and might not have been initially distrusting of him. He could have gained access to the trailer home with relative ease. However, if Kenneth and the mother were romantically involved, then Kenneth would probably be attending the party with her, unless he came up with an excuse that gave him time to leave the party and kidnap Carla. My second theory is that the mother was simply relying on Kenneth for that night for one reason or another. Perhaps, since she didn't have a car, she was hitchhiking to go get Carla, and Kenneth, once learning that there would be an innocent teenager alone in the mother's house, was more than happy to transport the women back and forth between homes. My one issue with this theory is that Kenneth would have then had to force his way into the trailer home, since Carla would have no reason to open the door to him, and there's no mention of forced entry in any of the information concerning Carla's case. However, there's very little information to begin with. No statements from her family, no details on what the police did to find her, no information on how they questioned Kenneth, so it's completely possible that there were signs of forced entry that the public was not made aware of. These next two theories revolve around what might have become of Carla after she was kidnapped by Kenneth. The first idea I had is, of course, that Kenneth murdered Carla after doing whatever he had originally set out to do. Carla's babysitting job was in Clearwater, a tiny unincorporated community situated on the banks of Clearwater River. The forests are thick around this small community, making logging a profitable local business. Kenneth could have dumped her body into the Clearwater River, or perhaps buried her somewhere in the woods, being familiar with the area and especially with the woods in which he worked as a logger. With very little information on how police handled the case, I'm also forced to consider the possibility that police simply didn't search very hard for Carla, which would have made disposing of her body that much easier. There is, however, a story that also makes this theory more likely. Lene Anderson was a teenager when her family hired Kenneth Berry to build a fence around their property in 1981, the same year Carla went missing. Lene saw a mention of Carla in a news article and put two and two together. She quickly notified police and media, admitting that she felt guilty for not coming forward sooner. According to Lene, she was out riding her horse around her family property when she noticed Kenneth burying something in the woods. When asked what he was doing, he claimed that he was burying a fence post. However, this made no sense because the place he was digging into was well outside the agreed-upon perimeter for the fence. Lene had actually earlier noticed visqueen plastic film in the back of his truck, and that had already given her a bad feeling, leading to her watching him more closely as he worked, but, perhaps wisely, given the circumstances, she did not push Kenneth's strange story and left him alone with whatever he was burying. Police dug up the ground around her childhood family property, but no evidence of Carla was found. My second and final theory regarding Carla's case is that Kenneth kidnapped her with the intention of keeping her. We've seen this play out in countless horrifying cases. J.C. Lee Dugard, Elizabeth Smart, and the victims of Ariel Castro, to name a few. However, this possibility turns much darker when you consider the fact that Kenneth died several years after Carla's disappearance. While he was still a suspect, nothing even says he was police's main suspect, let alone about to be prosecuted. I also couldn't find any information that said Kenneth's property was ever searched. This is incredibly concerning, especially in this theory, because if Kenneth had kidnapped Carla and kept her alive on his property, then once he died, nobody would have been there to care for her or free her. I hope desperately that this theory is completely false, and that police did search Kenneth's home and verify that Carla wasn't there, because otherwise, Carla may have been forced into a much more painful death. Whatever happened over the course of that summer night was a tragedy. Carla has never been found, and the case remains cold to this day. Her mother and father have since both passed away, as did her older sister, Clara, and her older brother, Andy. Clara had one daughter, and nothing on her Facebook page suggests she's concerned with the case of her missing hand. Clara's obituary also states that she was preceded in death by Carla, suggesting that Carla has, since her disappearance, been pronounced legally dead. One final injustice remains in this case. After gathering blood samples from both John and Gail Owens, police then lost those blood samples, which could be crucial in later DNA testing of the blood found on the broken bottle. Luckily, those samples were later regained, although there's been no news since about DNA testing. With most of Carla's immediate family gone, if not all of them, since I couldn't find information on her older brother or sister, there are very few people left in the world who care about Carla or what happened to her. Whatever befell the child all those years ago, the world seems to have given up on her. The police claimed to be performing new, modern tests on the DNA found in Barry's truck, but they made these claims in 2007 and 2008, over a decade ago, with no new news surfacing around Carla's case. If the police lose the DNA again, with no other surviving family members to replace it, Carla's case might be rendered hopeless forever. This case infuriates me, as do many others. I try to stay calm while researching them because at the end of the day, I don't have the full story. I don't know what happened to Carla, and I'm not trained to figure out what did. I don't understand the police's reasoning behind not prosecuting Kenneth Berry, but I'm sure reasons do exist. All in all, this case gets under my skin in a way a lot of other missing persons cases don't. Carla was a gentle, quiet girl who vanished in a bloody, violent scene, and nobody has gotten any justice for her in the decades since. Years and years have passed since her disappearance, but I'm continuing to hold out hope that one day, somebody will care enough about Carla to close her case and finally put her to rest in the way she deserves. Carla is probably dead, yes, but that doesn't mean we should stop fighting for answers. Carla was last seen wearing a light blue sweatshirt, a shirt that zipped in the front, and blue sandals. Her dental records and DNA are currently available. Please, if you have any information on this girl and where she might be, call one of the numbers in the description below. Please, help bring this child home.